Gears, the clockwork behind the stars. If you're watching this video, I'm assuming you're a member of the community, but if you're not, here's a quick overview. Gears is a series of surrealist Roblox games primarily developed by Termite King 9. It mainly uses old Roblox visuals and mechanics to give itself a unique atmosphere and identity. And while today, there's certainly been no shortage of games that make use of the old Roblox style, I think Gears uses it in a more unique way in contrast to other games. Now, I bring this up because there's a handful of Gears games that deviate from this old Roblox style. But there is a member of this group that stands out much more than the others. Alright, so this video is going to be split into 4 parts. In the first part, I'm just going to give a general overview of the game. In the second part, we'll figure out the game setting. And the third part is going to be an analysis of major game events and trying to uncover their symbolism. And then finally, we will connect all of this to other Gears games and its broader theme. So without further ado, let's get started. So, in the Underwater Gospel, you play as John Scuba Man, except you probably don't actually look like this, but we'll get to that later. You've taken a step into the deep blue sea on a quest to collect relics from ruins that, at least to you, have biblical significance. These relics range from dead fish to a demon trapped in glass, but that isn't the only thing you have to worry about down here, because there are several little critters down here to accompany you on your journey. And by accompany, I mean brutally eat you alive because you didn't take the time to read the description of the item that teaches you their mechanic. Eventually, though, you come across some things that don't make any sense to you, only fueling your curiosity, resulting in your faith overriding all fear in your body to continue your mission and blow up enormous squid eyes with your flare gun. And the game pretty much just ends after that. Now, before we move on, since I'm gonna cite it a couple of times, I want to talk about the short art project game, Water Womb World by Yames, a game that was the main inspiration for the Underwater Gospel. In Water Womb World, you play as a devout Christian who's been spending his life searching for the Garden of Eden, which you've now narrowed down to an underwater region known as Gasper's Zone. You find very strange oddities during your research and are seemingly contacted by angels. But you yourself are questioning if you are simply suffering from decompression sickness. Eventually, some crazy stuff goes down, ultimately leaving yourself with an ambiguous fate. So, I'm sure you picked up on a few similarities. I won't go into too much detail right now, but we will be using the plot of this game to give us some groundwork for figuring out Underwater Gospel's plot. Anyways, let's try to figure out why the hell we're even here in the first place. So, earlier, I said that you play as John Scuba Man, but you don't look like this. So, what I mean by that is that there's a discrepancy between the protagonist's diving gear between the thumbnail and actual gameplay. In gameplay, we appear to wear what seems to be a form of the standard diving dress, like what the Cyclops in the SpongeBob movie wears. However, in the game thumbnail, we appear to be wearing some more modern equipment, made of a rubber-like material. Now, it's possible that this equipment is on the older side because of the faceplate and the rebreather, and those reasons might be evidence that this is what we actually wear in game. However, I'm more inclined to say we're wearing a standard diving dress for 3 reasons. First, the interior of our helmet looks like copper rather than rubber. Second, during a dev stream, Termite was talking about the game's exaggerated gameplay elements, and he said, I quote, "That would be a really long hose." This is referring to a diving hose, which is how the standard diving dress got air and was how they surfaced. Basically, when they were ready to surface, air would be pumped in and it would float them up. And finally, Vord Hosbin has literally posted an image of the player model, and it's a standard diving dress. So, if we look like that, what's up with the guy in the thumbnail? I honestly don't know, but interestingly, this character takes the appearance of a Grubber account named Flensing Station. Now, let me make clear that Flensing Station isn't the protagonist, as its name comes from a location in the upcoming Old Castle. So, I'd say either the thumbnail is depicting an older design for the protagonist, or it's depicting this Flensing Station character. I'm not super sure, but perhaps we'll find out when Old Castle comes out in 30 years. So, what else do we know about our protagonist? Let's start with what we can deduce from the game itself. We know we are likely a Christian, given the fact that we at least believe this skull belongs to one of the people ruled by Noah's sons, as well as the fact that wearing this cross gives us the strength to continue forward to the boss. This can be further backed up by Water Womb World, as the protagonist comes from the same background. Now, given our goal is to collect relics, I think it can be assumed we are an archaeologist. As for who we work for, we have to look out of game. In other Gears games, a prominent group is the Dragonfish Adventure Club, a group of explorers documenting the clockwork for largely unknown reason. While there's no explicit reference to them in game, we know we work for them because of these two people on our boat, who can be found in a group photo in Lavender Ledges. While this certainly can be written off as reusing assets, I'm inclined to say that that's not the case. We also know that we are an experienced diver, and have been around the world, as we mentioned being to the Galapagos Islands. That's as much as we can deduce about our character, but now let's figure out where we are. This is actually pretty simple, as we only need the first relic. The relic tells us that we are in the Dalrymple Trough, located in the Erythraean Sea. You might assume we aren't on our Earth, but we actually are. These are real locations, but their names are pretty obscure. The Erythraean Sea is an archaic term for the ocean in and around the Red Sea and Gulfs of Aden and Oman. The name largely went out of style after the 19th century and was replaced by the term Arabian Sea. The Dalrymple Trough is a trench located on the Owen Fracture Zone on the Indian-Arabian plate boundary, offshore of Oman. You can actually see it on Google Earth, so here it is. The events of the game take place somewhere in here. Specifically, we are likely more than 200 meters underwater, as many of the fish below this depth lack the ability to perceive red light, like the ones in this game. Now, this is the hard part. Finding when this game is set is pretty confusing due to several contradicting pieces of information you get, the most obvious of which is the rock tabula and the locations mentioned in its description. The Erythraean Sea, as I mentioned earlier, went out of style after the 19th century, meaning it would have to take place before the 20th century. However, the Dalrymple Trough wasn't named until 1963, when the HMS Dalrymple and the HMS Owen surveyed the area together. I'm gonna write this off, however, either Termite made an oversight or it was named much earlier, because I couldn't find anything specific on the Dalrymple Trough, and I'm just assuming the two were named at the same time. So, while that leaves us with a wide year margin, there is a few other things we can do to narrow down the date quite a bit, more than I would have expected originally. First of all, the flare gun model that we use is a French M1917 flare gun, meaning that this would have to take place during or after 1917. Next, the blowtorch that we use was manufactured by Airco, an aviation company during World War I, which went defunct in 1920, meaning that it would have to take place before 1920, although not really, because obviously their products could still very much be in circulation. So instead of saying before 1920, I'm just going to slap an S at the end of 1920. So the year range is 1917 to the 1920s. So yeah, that's as much as we can get setting-wise. We are a Dragonfish Adventure Club member diving in ruins located in the Dalrymple Trough, likely between the years 1917 and the 1920s. But now is time for arguably the most interesting part of this. the symbolism, and in some cases, science behind the game's events and mechanics. Alright, so I'm pretty much just gonna go over things in the order that they happen. We'll analyze every relic, enemy, and any other thing I find important. Before we even start playing though, let's go over the thumbnail and the badges. So, in the thumbnail, we got this line of text. Quod est inferius est sicut quod est superius. This is the second half of the popular esoteric phrase, as above, so below, which, if you know Gears, you are probably aware of, as this isn't the only time it's used. In short, the phrase is comparing a higher realm to a lower realm, saying that they mirror each other, and in some cases can also metaphorically compare the microcosm, aka the individual, to the macrocosm, aka the larger universe. In this context, it's likely referring to the former. The ruins in this game are that of a lost civilization, one that mirrors our civilization. These quote-unquote worlds mirroring each other is what connects them. This is expressed pretty well in the thumbnail too, as we get glimpses of both above water and below water. Alright, so we got 3 badges here. For Muriatic Descent, Muriatic literally just means salty, so this badge literally means salty descent. Up next, we'll do Occident Explorer. This one is a little weird because in English, Occident means relating to the West. So while it's likely this is just saying where we come from, being the Western world, which in this terminology would include Europe along with the Americas, this makes sense because our character has been around the world, and we are in what archaically would be described as the East. But while I was doing research into this word, I learned that its Latin root is that of occido, meaning to fall. This is how the English word got its meaning, as it's where the sun quote-unquote falls. But in Latin, it means fall as in be defeated. So while I think it's more likely that the name just means Western Explorer, I think it's possible that it could mean Fallen Explorer. Perhaps by collecting all the relics, we have thus learned too much. Now for the most interesting badge, Despairism. This is what we achieve for winning. Despairism is an umbrella term for medical conditions that occur when one experiences a rapid change of pressure, mostly occurring in divers or fighter pilots. Examples of despairism include decompression sickness, barotrauma, nitrogen narcosis, HPNS, and arterial gas emboli. While I'm sure you get the implications, I will explain them later down the line. Okay, now it's time for the actual gameplay. While I already talked about like a majority of the rock tabula, it also mentions periodotite, which is a rock found on the upper levels of Earth's mantle that often forms in tectonic boundaries, such as troughs, which is where we are. This primarily just serves as exposition. It tells us where in the world we are, but also why we're here, because there's a language carved on it, meaning that people were here. Relic number 2 is a piece of barite. Barite often forms in areas with high tectonic activity, so that lines up with where we are. This piece has more specularity than usual though, meaning light reflects off of it more, which is odd given that we are currently in an underwater cave. So this crystal might possess some weird properties, similar to that of the demon crystal we find later, just not with a demon currently in it. It's at this point where we get our first explosive charge. Interestingly, there's a hole in the ceiling here, and there are for a lot of the other charges in this game. So, maybe that explains how we get them. Perhaps other people are dropping them in for us, which begs the question of, are there other divers in other parts of these ruins, and this operation is larger than it would initially seem? Or, of course, this is just a coincidence, but if it were the case, that would be some great environmental storytelling. Like 2, Relic 3 serves to tell the player that something is afoot here. Otolith rings are, well, rings on a part of the fish ear. The more rings, the longer it lived, like a tree stump. This actually parallels a moment from Water Womb World, where the player can find a skull that seems to have quite the longevity. The existence of the many rings on the fish gives way to the idea that something is up with time. But you know what controls time? Clockwork. While this game is set on our Earth, or at least we think it is, the clockwork of gears still has a presence here, as we'll see later. Relic 4 is a medallion that, when inserted into a wall, will open this door. As we point out, it's oddly well preserved for an object submerged in water for so long. And while gold doesn't really rust in water, it could be a sign of more time shenanigans going on. There's also apparently a monster in this area that nobody's seen, but a lot of people, including myself, have heard some strange noises here, so you never know. We've already gone over the blowtorch, so the next thing on our list is Relic 5, a human skull, or at least we think it is. Our character lists 3 groups who were founded by Noah's sons after the Great Flood, the reason he built the Ark. Realistically speaking, this skull would belong to a Semite, but it might belong to neither group, because assuming this belongs to someone who lived prior to the flood, they wouldn't fit into any group as they were created after the flood. Do you like eating squid? I've personally never tried it, but in Soviet Russia, squid eats you. Relic 6 is a claw that fell off of the squid enemy. Other than teaching the player its mechanic, the character mentions 2 things: the jumbo squid and the Columbus archipelago. Jumbo squid is another name for the Humboldt squid, one of the few species hostile to humans. The gameplay mechanic of the squid in this game is with the light, which is scientifically accurate, as Humboldt squids tend to swarm boats at night because of all the light they emit. But here's the thing, this isn't a Humboldt squid. Humboldt squids are only found in the Pacific Ocean, and we're nowhere near there, which brings us to the Columbus archipelago. This is a term for the Galapagos Islands. It's not archaic, it's actually just the official name of the islands translated into English, which there are Humboldt squids there. So the pro tag is simply just recalling previous information to help him here. So if this isn't a Humboldt squid, what species is this squid? Well, the image is of a strawberry squid, but those are a lot smaller and more passive than how our squid is depicted. So, yeah, what is this squid species? I honestly don't know. It's likely a species such as the purple-back flying squid, giant squid, or Indian squid. Although those typically aren't super aggressive towards humans unless threatened, which, I mean, if a random dude shows up in your cave shining a bright light in your face out of nowhere, then yeah, I would probably feel threatened too. But again, this could obviously just be an exaggerated gameplay element. Our 7th relic is the Pearl of a Clam, one that had a giant eye prior to us harvesting it. In a moment that directly parallels one from Water Womb World, our character proceeds to question if he is hallucinating. Interesting. The area with the flare gun provides us with a brief moment of peace, being able to look up at the seafloor once again. The song that plays here you probably recognize from Seven Fish, No Cien Number 2 by Eric Satie. While his compositions have a largely unknown meaning, it certainly does its job of providing a calm moment before what lies ahead. Because things are about to get serious. We then have to progress through a series of areas filled with these fish. As for what species they are, unfortunately there's not enough to tell. They kinda look like some species of dragonfish to me, but they aren't really aggressive towards humans, which again could be exaggerated for the game. But unfortunately there's not a heck of a lot to go off here model-wise, so I'm just gonna say we can't get a definitive answer. Anyways, the trick with these guys is that they can't see red light. As I mentioned a bit earlier, deep sea fish, typically 200 meters and below, can't see red light, so this is scientifically accurate. The thing is diving equipment from this era couldn't go more than 200 meters deep. Well, they could, just not without serious risk. Soon enough, everything turns red, and we come face to face with this feller. Yeah, I don't think this is a real species. Also, the door we gotta blow up to continue is made of human teeth. This is great. So clearly something is up here. With the last couple of things I've brought up, we've seen things that shouldn't exist, are at serious risk by even being here, and question if we are hallucinating. So, what if we are? Well, that's where the badge despairism comes in. Hallucinations are indeed a symptom of despairism, specifically nitrogen narcosis. So, let me tell you a theory I have. Nitrogen narcosis is when a buildup of nitrogen gas forms in the human body, typically as a diver descends deeper. This can cause a lot of stuff to happen, such as confusion, dizziness, and most commonly, hallucinations. Basically, you start tripping on nitrogen. So, I'm gonna list some things I haven't mentioned that we could use as evidence to support this theory, and then we'll talk about it. First off, the health bar in this game isn't your health, it's your oxygen. So maybe these quote-unquote enemies attacking us is making us confused and panic and thus lose our air supply quite a bit. Second, this is out of game, but I'm still going to use this. Wikipedia's chart of nitrogen narcosis symptoms lists all this crazy stuff for depths of only 90 meters and below, things that the player seems to experience throughout this game. Finally, this would parallel Water Womb World, as the ending of the game is up to your interpretation as to whether or not everything you saw was real or you were just tripping. So, this is a cool theory, but I honestly don't believe it's true. It wouldn't make a heck of a lot of sense for a termite to create this crazy lore-filled game and then it's just, oop, you were just high the whole time. But that doesn't mean I don't think we're suffering from a form of despairism. After all, why would the badge be called that? This only really has to do with the very end, so I will talk about it when we get there. So, continuing, our 8th relic can be found in an altar-like area. It's a demon trapped in a glass prism. As I mentioned with the barite, perhaps these people utilize these crystals for some crazy sorcery shenanigans. I don't know why they'd have a demon. I guess they just like to take part in exorcisms, and I mean they were religious seemingly, so makes sense, I guess. The 9th relic can be found in a room covered in alchemical symbols, a common theme in Gears games. As we point out, these symbols weren't around until the medieval era, so perhaps these people were the true origin of alchemy, something like that. For this part, we go literally under the map. This section notably has studs, the signature material of the clockwork. This is what I mean by that there's shenanigans going on, specifically with time. There's still an open portal to the clockwork here, and that has been screwing up time around this area. We are also literally out of bounds, not only in a game sense, but we are out of bounds from the world, which lines up with the clockwork behind the stars being Gears' description. This area is just likely flooded due to, like, the portal is still open and the ruins got flooded. And I don't really know about the anglerfish. I'm guessing it just kind of swam in here. I don't know, he's just vibing down here. After picking up a key with the old Roblox design, we find a blue flare cartridge, something that is pretty abnormal. The color blue has some interesting symbolism in the Bible. Since this game literally has gospel in it, I think it's a worthy idea they possess similar symbolism. The color blue in the Bible often symbolizes God, holiness, and eternity. So perhaps this flare is symbolizing our faith in God to guide us through this and to help us. After all, we need this flare cartridge to not only defeat the boss, but to trigger it in the first place. So, heading back up, we open the door and collect the final relic. Bear your cross. We are rejuvenated by this and have faith that God will guide us through it. And so we are attacked by one final marine creature, one that has never been documented or even perceived to be possible. A squid that is so huge that its diet would have to consist of significantly larger life than what exists underwater. And despite being a human being and we're the size of a mediocre snack to it, it's still craving one. But we fight. With every ounce of strength left in us, every liter of faith, every gallon of curiosity, we fight and we win. But something's wrong. There's no rope lowered to save us, no boat reeling us in. It's just the end. We didn't understand the risks of this mission. Despite all the faith we had to come out in one piece, we were too far underwater for God to hear our muffled plea for help. And now, whatever form we had, Despairism has taken its final blow on us, and we black out. The song Christmas Kids starts playing. We are victorious, but the world will never learn of it, and we have to die knowing that. Well, that was something. Now, before I wrap things up, I want to talk about this game's connections to others, primarily Musty Old Tomb and Lemurian Labyrinth. Musty Old Tomb shares several parallels to Underwater Gospel, specifically the presence of the Dragonfish Adventure Club along with the exploration of ruins that share a connection to the clockwork. Musty Old Tomb is also likely set in the Arabian desert, as the palace with no entrance from a King Solomon story makes an appearance here. This would make sense chronologically as well. Either before or after the events of Gospel, the Dragonfish Adventure Club wanted to investigate more places with potential biblical significance, so they explored the same region that they found either the Gospel ruins or the Musty Old Tomb ruins. The ruins in Musty Old Tomb give way to the idea that this civilization was more widespread, or that this is a different one but several civilizations know about the clockwork. Alright, this one's for you, Vorthosbin. Lemurian Labyrinth. The continent of Lemuria was a proposed lost continent believed to have sunk beneath the waves. While modern geological study has disproven its existence, what if it was actually true? There's been a bit of theories about how Gospel and Lemurian take place in the same location, and I wanted to talk about this a bit. Lemurian Labyrinth takes place in a sort of border world, I'd say. It starts out using materials, but soon becomes studded, kinda like paralleling the anglerfish section from Gospel. So, Lemuria's location, the continent, not the game, is a little disputed. There's the Kumari Kandam version in Tamil folklore, a Pacific variation, and an Arabian Sea one, which, for the sake of this theory, I will say is quote-unquote correct. Now, Lemurian and Gospel can't logically take place in the exact same location because Lemurian isn't filled with water, but then again it is kind of a border world as I said earlier, so it doesn't have to be filled with water. But that doesn't mean that they aren't similar. I think it's likely that the Gospel ruins belong to the Lemurians or is in the same region of the world. I do think that the Gospel ruins are the ruins of Lemuria if this theory were to be correct. Maybe the Lemurians were the people who lived prior to the flood, and this skull might belong to a Lemurian and not necessarily a human, although it's not super clear if they're humans or not. I think they're not, but either way they're humanoids, so their anatomy would likely be similar. They also share similar fondness for alchemy and the elements. So while there's not really a heck of a lot of direct links, it's definitely a possible theory. Alright, well, I don't have much else to say, so let's wrap everything up. The Underwater Gospel is a story about faith, and how too much of that faith can ultimately jeopardize you. And assuming our main character really did succumb to the rapture of the deep, even take your life. It's a classic story of curiosity killed the cat and Pandora's box. And while those could certainly be considered cliché, this game does it in a way that you don't really notice unless you try to look for meaning in it. And that's the point of these surreal games. They don't necessarily need to have a meaning or story. Hell, I'm doing the exact same thing the protagonist is doing. I'm looking for meaning in something that doesn't necessarily have one, and potentially I'll learn too much. But that's human nature, and this game does a phenomenal job at exploring it. even if you sever the connection between it and Gears or even Roblox, it still carries that message wholeheartedly, and that's why this is probably one of my favorite games to have ever played. Well, that's all I have for you today. If there's any feedback you have, suggestions for what to do next, or even your own ideas to share or want to build on top of mine, feel free to leave a comment or ping me in the Discord server. I'm always up for this kind of stuff. And obviously, don't assume everything I said in this video was correct. I'm just sharing my ideas, and I'd be shocked if everything I said was correct. So by all means, don't consider this game as solved. There's still a lot more to uncover and plenty more things to talk about in the future. And so, with that, I'll see you around.